Special Counsel Robert Mueller broke 2 years of silence about his investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election.
He said he does not intend to testify to Congress, and he explained why he did not have the option of charging the president with a crime. The director of the Marquette Law School poll, Charles Franklin, is back with us today with some analysis. Hi, Charles. Good to see you.
Good to be back.
So what was your reaction?
I thought it was what the report had actually said when it was released. The things that Mueller emphasized today are right there in the first few pages of the report. That Russia clearly interfered, that they didn't have definitive evidence about collusion or about obstruction, but more importantly that they're prevented by Justice Department policy from charging the president while he's in office, and that the Constitution says there's a process for how to deal with this. So I think, maybe not surprisingly, he was completely consistent with the language of the report, and then he went on to say, and I have nothing more to say, it's there in the report. So he's standing by his report pretty much to the letter.
So reading between the lines, he would maybe charge if he could? There was enough to...
Yeah, I think that's the ambiguity of the report and the difficulty of this position that he has. He says it's not fair to charge someone in the report with a crime which they then can't be tried for and exonerate themselves through a trial. So therefore the report won't say whether there should be a charge here or not. And instead, it falls back on pretty strong grounds that the Constitution has an explicit procedure for dealing with this. But he doesn't go to the point of saying, and I think Congress should pursue impeachment, nor does he say they should not. And that ambiguity has allowed the president's supporters to see vindication in the report and allowed the critics of the president to say there's so much here it demands further steps through impeachment now.
That's the constitutional process.
That's exactly what it is. And there was debate during the ratification of the Constitution on this very point, with the question being raised, what if the president commits crimes? And the answer from the framers of the Constitution, James Madison himself, was, we have that covered through impeachment.
And those drums are beating louder than ever today.
Today you saw, I know of at least 2 presidential candidates who came out in favor of proceeding with at least impeachment hearings.
That was Kirsten Gillibrand and Cory Booker.
Right. And, you know, saying hearings, not necessarily saying vote for articles of impeachment yet, but of the many Democratic committee chairs who've spoken today, there's pressure to move ahead, certainly from the base of the party, the most powerful, strong advocates for Democrats. There's a real desire to move ahead. But then you have Speaker Pelosi saying this may not be the wise political move, we should hold off. So it remains to be seen how Democrats settle this.
And you've done some polling on this question.
We did. We were in the field between the time the Barr letter came out summarizing the report in 4 pages, but before the report itself came out. So it's important to know things may have changed in that time. But right then, 65% said there was not enough reason to start impeachment hearings. And that was up from about 54% in January. So more people moved to that. But at the same time, 54% said the report doesn't settle things and there's still more questions. Only 39% said it cleared the president clearly. So mixed feelings. And again, I say this report is ambiguous enough in its choice of language and its refusal to come to a conclusion. It lays out a lot of facts, but it doesn't say this means do this or do that. That it leaves it to people to judge for themselves, and that leaves us in the position we're in right now.
If there are impeachment hearings, a lot of new information would come to light.
Maybe.
I mean,
I think the biggest thing, it may or may not be new. I don't actually have any idea whether we'd get really new material. But I do think if we go back to the Watergate hearings, that we had several straight weeks of daytime broadcast hearings, and it's during that time that support for President Nixon declined the most. This was in the summer of '73 going into the fall of '73. And it was the systematic laying out of the evidence, the testimony by John Dean and reports of the tape recordings that existed. That was the period where the president's support really fell off. Later in the year and into the spring and summer of '74, it actually didn't change very much until the very end when the smoking gun tapes came out just before the president resigned. So I think that is the argument for televised hearings. They focus the case and they present evidence continuously over time. On the other hand, it's undoubtedly true that such hearings would be extremely contentious this time.
Yeah, it's very divided.
Exactly. And Republicans on the committees seem, at this point, poised to mount a strong defense of the president, even if Democrats are willing to mount a strong attack. And where does that work? In the Nixon case, the evidence was fairly one-sided, even if the president had lots of defenders in Congress still.
Does this fall on Nancy Pelosi's shoulders?
I think it's very much there, and that's gone back and forth. Again, a lot of Democratic activists were really upset when she said, let's not proceed. It's not wise to proceed. And she's gotten some political support for that. Some of the things have broken her way to support that position. But today and building to today, I think you have seen some shifts among presidential candidates for sure, who are very concerned about the activist base and making them happy with them as candidates. And now some of the committee leaders. I have no idea which way it'll end up, but it's a difficult balancing act for Democrats.
Interesting times, that's for sure. Charles, thank you.
Good to see you, Charles.
My pleasure.
Interesting as usual, and we'll be right back with a final check of your forecast.